So if you haven't seen, first of all, the boosted episode is great. It's a whole exploration of like the rise and fall of boosted boards and how that, I mean, had a really high apex and then a really low trough at the bottom. But it's a really good like overall story to follow. But for me, right to repair is interesting because the more I looked into it, especially for the video that we ended up making, the more I ended up being on the side of like it seems really, really difficult for like any one final conclusion to work.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are two forces that are going to always be working against each other, which is tech getting more and more well integrated and better and harder to repair, and then people wanting to be able to repair that stuff.
Yeah.
And they will always be at odds with each other, and that was the part I had the hardest time with. Spoke to Louis Rossman about it. He gave me his 2 cents, which I really liked, which was...
I just want it to be, if you're going to glue something into the device, whatever it is, I'm willing to jump through all those hoops to fix it, but don't tell the company that made this part they're not allowed to sell it to me.
It may seem hard to understand that this stuff is going to continue to get harder to repair, but they're up for that challenge. People who actually repair these things also evolve with the tech. Now, we were talking about this before, like, I don't know how deep that goes. Like when you're talking like soldering the memory to the sensor of a camera or literally just combining parts that used to be 3 different pieces into one piece. Like you could say that's done to make it obsolete later. You could say that's done to make it harder to repair, but also typically it makes it better. Like the image processing happens faster when it's on a chip closer to the image that needs to be processed. So all this stuff is always at odds, but I'm curious what other stuff you've dug up. Maybe there's a devil's advocate side of like the anti-right to repair movement. I don't think it's even a movement. It's more of just like the constant lobbying and conversation from those who don't support right to repair.
Yeah, I mean, just to like play off your point there, I mean, like IBM last week announced 2 nanometer processors, right?
2 nanometers.
Yeah.
Okay.
With a whole new architecture type, so they're not even using FinFET anymore. And this is just an example of like how deeply integrated tech is getting. Like they're using ultraviolet light to create these chips because the visible light spectrum has too big of a wavelength to actually fit transistors on.
Jesus.
So like this is the point in which no, you can't go in there and fix these things because they're thinner than a strand of DNA. It's not like you can go in there with tools.
Right.
But once we get to that point, you know, there's so many benefits. 4 times better battery life with 2 nanometer. Your phone could last 5 days on a single charge. You know, it's like very, very useful.
Yeah.
But regardless, yeah, I tried to talk to as many people on as many sides as we could get a hold of. Got lucky and was able to speak to the...
Julian Sanchez. I'm the Director of Emerging Technologies at John Deere.
Which sounds...
I always find this part interesting when like this, like we're so focused in the tech world, but tech like enthusiasts and right to repair enthusiasts have like made this alliance with these farmers, and a lot of them are like, it's very based in Nebraska. It feels like, I know my sister-in-law is a reporter in Nebraska and they cover it a ton. And just like John Deere has created the same kind of problem that we're seeing with like Apple, where it's like these farmers want to be able to repair these machines and therefore it is stopping in a similar way Apple is. So now you don't really see farmers and tech nerds like banding together too often, but here we are.
But also everything is tech. Like when
it really is.
I learned so much watching those John Deere videos about how high tech those tractors are. When I think of a tractor, I just think of a thing you pour gasoline in and drive across the field. But like they have so many automated systems to the point where like they save lots of money by relying on the tech in these tractors and how exactly the irrigation is distributing like, you know, pesticides and things like that. Like it's really high tech stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2021, you can find a tech argument or a tech angle to almost everything. So it almost doesn't surprise me that tractors are looped into that.
Which is why like this general discussion right now is going to have such big precedent for the future. And I think the reason it becomes such a discussion and the reason we really dove into it, other than you talked to the people with Boosted, it brought up the conversation. We all sat down one day and had like a 3-hour conversation about what we were, because like, it's really hard to pick one side. There's I think most of us would lean towards the right to repair side, obviously, but there's a lot of times when these bigger companies bring up points that are hard to argue.
Exactly.
It's really, really hard to argue some of those points. So that's why I think we reached out to all these different people to try and get a better idea from people in the realm of what's going on.
You want to get a more balanced, viewpoint, right? Because it's like, obviously, like you said, we're all going to kind of like lean towards right to repair.
Yeah.
But talking to the CTO of John Deere, I was like, oh, wow. Like the amount of things that are benefited by the amount of technology that they put in these tractors. And first of all, I just want to say, like, I loved that we ended up taking this like tractor angle, because when you think of tech and then you think of farming, I think that's not the first thing that comes to mind. It's not but then you say like everything is tech and it's like, oh yeah. And a really good point that the CTO brought up to me was that farming is kind of a unique industry, because
this is one of the great things about agriculture, which is that environmental sustainability and profitability are actually one and the same. In a lot of spaces, you have to sort of sacrifice something in order to get environmental sustainability. In farming, if you can ultimately get to a point where you don't have to apply or use as much stuff, you are making money and you are benefiting the environment.
So they actually have a benefit, like they have this incentive to optimize better. And farming is all about optimization, right? Like how much water exactly can you use to get the most crops possible? He told me that one of their tractors that they have right now can use AI to determine what is a weed and what is a plant while it is driving over these crops. And then it will only spray the pesticides on the weeds. And they save 90% of the pesticides that they were spraying before they used this tractor with this AI, which is insane. And it's like good for the environment, way less pesticides. Exactly. It saves the farmers tons of money.
This is why it was hard for me, because I fall on the side of, yes, we should have right to repair, and that's where I landed with the video. But I also want tech to get better.
Exactly.
Like I want that 90% savings, and I want the obvious benefits that come with optimization to be available to all and to keep moving forward. So like all of those arguments that I fully understand, like it's easy to take a side if you work for one of these companies of the other side. So I can imagine if you work for not just John Deere, but Tesla or Apple or any number of companies that, as Louis Rossmann would put it, pretty much every company has some sort of anti-right to repair stance. I could see how they would land on the, don't you want us to make our stuff better? Yeah. Don't you want those savings? Don't you want the tech to continue to move forward? That's going to be their argument every time, and that's why it's hard to argue against it. Yeah. But us on the other side, we're like, well, if the screen breaks, I don't want to have to throw the whole thing out.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I was kind of pressing him on because we watched these videos from Motherboard did a video on this movement with these farmers to get the tractors more repairable. I guess the main problem that they have right now is that these tractors at this point are all very integrated. Like we talked about earlier, the more integrated, the better the technology gets, and so because of this, there's sensors all over the tractor. They can determine if things are going wrong, and they can throw error codes. And if they throw specific error codes, you can't really use the tractor until you bring it into a service center, or what he said is that a service center agent will actually get dispatched out to you because they also have LTE. And as soon as it notices that there is an issue, it will send a text message to the farmer and say, hey, this has an issue that needs to be worked on by a service person. Do you want us to dispatch someone right now, or do you want to bring it in?
There's a lot of cases where the dealer will call the customer ahead of time and say, hey, have you seen the trouble code? Oh, no, I'm really busy. Okay, well, we saw it, and there's a repair person on the way to help you out.
So that's kind of crazy, too. And what these farmers are basically pushing for is they don't want to have to deal with the time it takes to have one of these out of commission. But something that, and I'm playing devil's advocate. I don't want to be just a marketing mouthpiece for John Deere.
No,
let's be clear about that.
For sure.
But he did tell me that 95% of the problems on the tractors can be fixed with just standard tools, and you don't need anybody out there. He said the tractor is able to determine problems with, like, if you have a leaky hose of some kind, that like a pressure hose, it knows that that is leaky because it's not getting certain pressure readings off of this pressure sensor, and you can replace that with any third-party part. He said 95 times out of 100, you are able to fix that as a farmer. It's just when you get these specific error codes where like things are a bigger problem, and their worry there is like, if you've seen these tractors, like at CES, they have these tractors that they started.
They're bigger than this room.
They're freaking massive. They are so big, and like, you don't want to risk the chance of like, something major malfunctioning because it's a very computerized thing, and they run themselves and they are self-driving.
They're like autopilot tractors.
Yeah. Like at this point, it is just an operator sitting in the seat that kind of pivots like you're in a starship or something. Mm-hmm. And you're not even really pressing anything. You're just making sure that you're not running over anything terrible. Because he said something that's kind of funny that they have not yet figured out is
there are no systems at the moment in commercialized that are doing obstacle recognition and therefore avoidance.
They have self-driving, but like if you got like, I don't know, a barrel in the field or something, it'll just run right over it.
Okay.
I got to work on that one.
So they've got all this technology, but they don't have that, which is kind of funny. But anyway, yeah, no, would love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. I mean,
Yeah, so we'll start with the tractor stuff. I feel like obviously I'm not a farmer, so I'm not going to have the
Farmers
most
only.
educated opinion about what tractors should and shouldn't do. But no, it makes a lot of sense. I keep hearing that as soon as something goes down, farmers are dealing with the downtime, but they're also dealing with the amount of money it takes them to bring the tractor into wherever that service center for John Deere is to have it fixed and then to get it all the way back. It could be thousands of dollars. And so if the farmer had the ability to fix any and every problem, that would help their business, that would help their downtime, everything would be better for the farmer. John Deere sees it as a liability, the way I understand it, where if someone does go into those 5% of problems where it really shouldn't be touched by someone who doesn't know what they're doing, and then they hurt themselves or they damage the whole tractor, then it looks bad to John Deere, and now John Deere has to deal with even more stuff. So they just want to limit that liability, which is what companies do. I get it. So I don't have a conclusion or a side to take. It's just like, that's the way it's going to look from this side.
I think it's always going to be, maybe not easy, but there will always be an argument, because even if it's 95% of the time, even if John Deere's customer service is incredible, there's going to be a time where that 5% happens on a really bad day for that farmer, that they need their stuff right away. They're on a really bad time crunch. It's going to happen, and they can't wait for that. And if they know if they had the tools, they could fix it. And no matter what, no matter how good everyone works, those complaints are going to be pushed to the front. And we're always going to see that as an issue.
Yeah.
And the minute one farmer talks to all their other farmers, I mean, this isn't just farmers. This is people using iPhones. This is people using computers. Like, if I have a problem with something and I can't get it fixed right away, or I get inconvenienced, I'm going to complain to everybody.
Yeah, no, it's this weird balance, right? Because obviously if you're using 90% less pesticides, you are much more fuel efficient because it is, driving itself. So you're not driving over the same path multiple times. Or like, this is all optimization. So you have to balance like that potential downtime that you're going to have with the benefit of like, how much extra crop are you going to have? And it just becomes this like, sure, this is going to be very difficult to deal with like twice a year. Yeah. But all the benefits that you're getting from that, like, does that outweigh that potential downtime you have?